Hey guys, Clay here at Havoc Off-Road. This is the Atlas transfer case from Advanced Adapters. Now we've specifically ordered this for our 2015 JK Unlimited automatic with aftermarket axles. You've got Spicer style yokes, we've got all the shift levers that we need, we've got our AMS oil, and I'm going to show you how to install this in your 2015 JK Unlimited with automatic. So let's get started. Now the first thing we're going to do is get our 18mm socket, and we're going to remove this cross member, and we're going to remove the skid plate right underneath the transfer case. Now that we got the skid plates removed, I'm going to go ahead and remove the front and rear drive shaft. Now before I take these last two out, I'm going to get a Sharpie and I'm going to draw a line from the yoke on the axle to the drive shaft, and then that way when we assemble everything we know what orientation the drive shaft was with the pinion yoke. Now these bolts are the same 8mm bolts that are on the rear. Draw another line just so we know which way it's orientated. Now we're going to remove the front drive shaft, and it's got these same 8mm bolts on the transfer case side. All right, now I've got my jack stand right underneath the front. The back's going to be captured by this cross member, and these are just 15mm bolts, so we'll just remove those. Now I can't fit a punch back there comfortably, so I'm just taking an Allen wrench and tapping on it. Seems to be working good. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove this drain plug and drain the fluid out of this transfer case. It'll reduce the weight a little bit, and if you're going to sell this case for parts to a buddy or do anything with it, you should check this fluid anyway. Now this one's got almost 0 miles on it, so I'm sure it's fine, but it's just a habit. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove this cross member. I've got a jack stand here on the transmission pan. I've got a piece of wood to span across the pan to kind of spread out the amount of force that this jack is putting on the pan. Two 18mm bolts that are holding the gas tank skid into the cross member, and then just various 16mm bolts here and there. So we're just going to start removing all of this stuff till we can get this cross member out of the way. All right, now before I remove these bolts, I'm going to go ahead and get another transmission jack under here, and then we can lower that down. Now you can remove the whole gas tank skid, but we've wiggled it out enough so that way we don't have to do that. And once you remove the bolts from this isolator, it just kind of pulls out, and then you've got enough room to get this cross member out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and remove the shift cable from the bracket. You're just going to pinch in on these yellow tabs, and it should slip right out. And then there's a vent tube up there, but I've got a little bit of slack on that. There's another plug in there, so I'm gonna go ahead and start removing some of these bolts or the nuts from these studs that are into the transfer case, so we can go ahead and start getting it off of there. Now I'm going to remove this plug at the top. I'm just going to press on the back side of this plug and lift up. I've got most of the bolts removed. There's a bunch of 14mm nuts on studs all the way around this flange. So once you get those removed all the way around, we'll go ahead and transfer case should just slip off the back of the transmission. All right, there you go. Transfer case is out. Now we need to remove this coupler from the transmission. It's an awkward, weird socket that you're probably not gonna have. I just went down to the local parts store and picked one up. It's a 30mm deep well 12-point socket. And there it goes. And there it is. So now that we've got the coupler off the transmission, we need to do a very important check. We need to go ahead and assemble this on the transmission. Then this is going to slip inside the transfer case and bolt with 4 bolts to this flange. So looking from your transmission to the transfer case, I just wanted to show you guys how that's going to assemble. It comes with 4 Allen bolts. The instructions are very clear. When you slip this transfer case onto the transmission, there can be no gap in between this faceplate and the backing plate of the transmission. If there's even a 1/16 of an inch gap, we've got the wrong output shaft and we need to stop and call Advanced Adapters and swap that out. Before we install any of our shifting linkage, before we do anything else, I'm gonna go ahead and install this stuff on the transmission and then we'll test fit our transfer case. All right, now we're gonna put our flange on the back of the transmission. You notice you've got a recess back here that's gonna go towards the transmission. Should slip on pretty easy. Now I've got Loctite on this. You really can't have too much. And we'll torque that down and then we'll put our secondary plate on. Now we're gonna torque this down to 147 feet-pound. Oop, there you go. As soon as you hear it click once, back off. You're right where you need to be. Then we can go ahead and put on our second shaft, our intermediate shaft. And those are held on with 3/8 Allens. Make sure all this area is clean, guys. If your Jeep's got more miles on it than ours does, I'm just gonna snug these up and then we'll torque all these down to 60 foot-pounds. Now I'm just gonna tighten these, opposing each other, and keep crisscrossing back and forth until we hear our torque wrench click. All right, now we've got the transfer case lined up with the transmission. You don't want to see any gap in between the two of those. So as I put pressure on this, I had a buddy walk around and make sure there's no gap on either side. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this case back off of here because after looking at the drive shaft angles, I can't really determine where the transmission is gonna sit without putting this cross member back in. You might want to take some measurements of that at the beginning before you take that cross member out, because we've jacked the transmission up and down just trying to get everything to fit right. So like I said, we're just going to reinstall that. That way I know exactly where the transmission is going to sit and then we can properly clock our transfer case. I've already installed 5 of the studs that come with the kit. They've already got red Loctite. There's a coarse thread and a fine thread. Coarse thread goes on the transfer case side. Just make sure you get the same location on all of these mounting points. And what I'm doing is just going to put a nut on the threads, put a washer in the middle. And they said not to preload these, so I'm just tightening these until they bottom out, and as soon as I feel it reach the end of the threads, I just stop. So we'll remove these plugs. These are just to help keep debris out of the threads. You've got this plate in your kit. Comes with 3 Allen bolts. Now this is billet aluminum, so you can torque down on it pretty good, but if you're known for stripping out threads, let's not strip them out. Next, the kit comes with this barrel nut and then an insert. This insert is just going to go inside there. That small insert is what actually threads into the cable. Now your shift fork is in here on the other side of this, so same thing. When you're tightening this stuff down, tighten it down, but you're not, this is just going to hold the shifting mechanism. It's not going to actually hold the transfer case to the Jeep. So you want it snug, but the thread locker should be what actually keeps that on there. Now the kit also comes with this piece that if you run into tolerance issues on the transmission side, will help relocate this shift cable, but we're going to try it without it first. All right. And this is the plate that you'll actually adjust your cables on, so that way when we shift everything, if you need adjustment at the transfer case side, this is where that's going to happen. We're going to go ahead and install the bushings into the shift levers. I'm doing this in a vise, just putting a rag in there so it doesn't mar anything up. Just use the vise as a mini press. Make sure you got everything lined up. So we got 4 of those bushings to put in, then we can install these together into this shift housing. Now we'll install the shift barrels onto the shifter bracket. This piece is just going to slip over these barrels and then bolt. The bracket's already threaded.
You missed up and trusted Kirk. Bringing a southpaw up in here.
Now it's time to install our shift levers into our shift bracket. You need to place this and orient it in a position that it would be in the Jeep. These cables are going to run out of these barrels back to the transfer case, so this would be facing the dash. And you want this curve to face forward to give you leverage on shifting forward and backwards. So this hole is where we're going to push this pin through these levers all the way through, and then it's got a locking nut. just going to fish that through till we can line everything up. Now once you get this pin through both of these shift levers, it's a press fit on this other side too, so just get everything lined up. I'm using a dead blow hammer so I don't hurt anything. Socket that's oversized to fit over that. Just make sure you got everything lined up, and we're just going to kind of keep. Once you get that pin seated, we'll go ahead and thread our locking nut on there. And this doesn't have to be over tight. Everything is a press fit. This locking nut is really on there just to hold and make sure that that pin doesn't work its way out. Now we're going to assemble our shift cable into our barrels on our shift bracket. Just remove and discard this. Keep the lock washer on there. This little heim joint with the kit and this other bolt are what's going to attach this to the actual shift lever. This is just going to go through the barrel. Now we're going to thread this little mini heim joint on the end of the cable. There's a cutout on the side of this to go ahead and feed this Allen bolt through. We're going to go through the heim joint, and then the steering linkage is already tapped, so you don't need a nut. And then we'll thread lock that. All right, there you go, guys. Finished shifter assembly. Now we're just going to test this. Like I said, it may seem like a lot of work to go ahead and assemble all of this outside of the Jeep, test the gears, and then put it back in. And it may go super quick and easy, and I may look back at this and go, oh, I could have done this in the Jeep, but I'd just rather do it out here. That way, if I do have an issue with anything, I can go ahead and sort those problems out here on the bench and not inside the Jeep, upside down. The factory, there's a red plug in here. We need to remove that. It's just a plastic. So they include this block-off plate because on our JK, the speedometer gets its information from the wheels and the tone rings and the sensors. So once you install that, just going to put this clip on here. Tighten this down, and once we get this tightened down, we can go ahead and fill our case. Now, in the instructions, it's explicit that it only takes 2 quarts, and it warns you about overfilling the transfer case. Now we're going to install these sensors into the shift rail block. This is on the back side of the transfer case. These sensors are what tell your dashboard and your computer whether or not you're in 4 high, neutral, or 4 low. There are 2 plugs on the back of the shift block. I've already removed one, and we're going to thread that in there. But before I do that, we're going to remove the other one. And these are tight on this, so don't be afraid to put some leverage on them to remove them. We need to remove the transfer case shifting knob. There's no perfect tool for this. This just snaps onto a little groove on top of the lever. So what I'm going to do, in case you want to reuse this, is just put a rag around it, and you're going to twist on this a little bit back and forth until you loosen the plastic underneath the knob. And then once you feel it loosen up a little bit, it should just snap right off. Okay, we just cut our cable. We're gonna leave the grommet in place and this should just, oh, there we go. We need to go ahead and splice this clip on where this factory clip is at. Now this clip from Advanced Adapters is color coordinated. You've got blue with the blue and yellow, and then there's a yellow with a green stripe, and that green wire is gonna get spliced into there. The kit comes with shrink tubing. They want you to shrink tube each one of these wires individually and then have one further up the line so that you can slip that back over and shrink tube them to get them to stay together. And I'm actually going to stand off of this clip a little bit just in case I need to reuse it for something. So we've got our plug connected and wired up. The lines are gonna feed forward, so I've got the lines forward. Put the transfer case in gear before you put the transfer case on the transmission. Now that we've got the studs mounted to the flange, you can't clock the transmission around to get the splines to line up, so you need to be able to turn the output shaft so that you can line the splines up with the transmission as everything goes in at once. This is the factory vent line. They highly recommend to discard this and go with a 3/8" fuel line. This vent line is designed to vent transmission viscosity fluid, which is really thin, so it doesn't create as much heat. This transfer case is gear driven, so it's got a thicker gear lube in it, and it needs a larger tube diameter so that it can vent more heat in and out of the transfer case as things spin around. So now I'm going to go ahead and put blue RTV, as the manufacturer suggests, right around this clocking ring. Push your side up some more. Okay. Now it's time to hook up everybody's favorite, the electrical components. Now we've gone ahead and swapped out the plug on this. There was one plug going to the transfer case before. Now there are two plugs in the back of the transfer case now. The kit comes with two extensions. The one with the orange and the brown wire are going to go to the driver's side. Then the one with the red and the tan wire are going to go to the passenger side. Now this harness has got those same clips with the same wires here. So I think these are extensions depending on how you're going to route all of this. What we've done is we've lowered our skid plate for the gas tank, taped off, marked, punched, and drilled two holes for this, whatever that is. This is some kind of electronic module that I'm sure sends information from the transfer case to your dash. So that's where I chose to mount it. Instructions aren't clear about this. So there's two wires that come out of this harness that we're going to run to the engine bay. The purple wire, the instructions claim to disregard, so we're not going to worry about that. This is going to go into a factory fuse location in your block. Really clean stuff. And then this is a ground. Already got a ground lead crimped on it. I'm going to route this along the passenger side. There's already, it may be difficult for you to see right here. This loom already runs up under the frame rail in between the floorboard on the passenger side. There's no exhaust, there's no fuel lines, everything's nice and cool. I'm gonna run my wire from the transfer case and zip tie it along with the new 3/8 vent tube to that all the way up to the engine bay, and then we'll mount that stuff up in the engine bay. Okay, this is not an adapter. You do have to use this. I was just looking at the plugs and assuming that it was, and we know what happens when you assume things. So you do need to use this. I'm sure they use this harness for a wide range of different applications. So just make sure you get the colors coded, brown and orange to the brown and orange. And the brown and orange is gonna go on the driver's side, and then we'll put the adapter on this red and tan and attach that to the passenger side. And then this is the stock plug that we spliced in from your transfer case. All right, we've got all of our wires zip tied. I just followed that loom all the way up the passenger side like we were talking about before. You can zip tie this stuff anywhere you want, guys. I just want to show you what I did. I coiled up some of the excess right here by the engine bay in case I remount this later. We modify this, put 2 batteries in here, whatever. It's a Jeep, so things are probably going to change in the future. I just snipped a little bit out of the plastic tray right here to make access for that wire. This is the plug that comes with the kit. It's just an extension with a fuse, and it goes right into an empty slot right there per the instructions. I've got the ground terminal right over here on a fender bolt, so that should be a good solid ground. This all shuts like factory now. You can barely tell anything's there. You're going to need to cut your grommet, fish your cables up through, and then attach them to the bracket. I've already done that. Now we need to cut the top of this bolt off that's attached to the body. I'm going to go ahead and thread the nut down. That way once we cut it off, if we mar or burr any of those threads, we can actually use the nut to chase those threads a little bit. You can see we've gone ahead and snapped our center console piece back over. Everything fits like factory finish. I mean, I don't really think you could ask for a better fit and finish than that. The kit comes with 2 of these knobs, one for the front and one for the rear, and a jam nut for each one. Now you have to turn the engine on. We've got the drive shafts out of this, of course, but turn the engine on, and this transfer case is fully synchronized, so you cannot shift it into gear without moving it a little bit. Double check, make sure you've got your cables to the appropriate shifter, because if you have swapped the cables by accident, you can just put the knobs on the other shift lever and it doesn't matter, but you do want the R for the rear and the F for the front so you don't get mixed up. But that's a pretty straightforward, clean looking install right there. I don't think it was too difficult, but I'm going to go around, double check everything, make sure that we've tightened all of our loose bolts and nuts and that everything's zip tied up and out of the way. Alright guys, that was the install. A little time consuming, a lot of small parts. We had to do a lot of pre-assembly. Test fitting with something like this is imperative. You don't want to rush whenever you're doing it. Make sure you have the time to do the job right. Clean everything before you start. Get about 50 gallons of Loctite, maybe 100. You're going to need help. Having a friend help you put this in is going to make it possible. Lifting this beast by yourself, I'm not saying somebody can't do it, but I personally can't. But look at this beef that we have for our transfer case right now. This is where you want to go whenever you're going wheeling. You want to make sure you're not going to break anything. If you guys have any questions, give us a call or visit us at havocoffroad.com. Thanks.